Some of you might recognize Where's Waldo? This was a book that was written, best I understand, about 1987, and since then, 58 million copies of the many different Where's Waldo books have been printed. There's been a video game, a movie made, clothes, Where's Waldo clothes, more characters that have been developed to go along with this. And just in case you're one of the 6 people in the world who doesn't know about Where's Waldo, Where's Waldo is a deal with somewhere in the maze of these pictures, and it's always, it may be a picture of a football game or on the beach or a festival, somewhere where there's a lot of people. There's Waldo is mixed into all of these faces somewhere, and the object is to find Waldo. And even though this is a fun character, a fun time passer, and millions of children and adults have enjoyed it over the years, it should not be the story of the Christian. It should not be the story of the Christian. A Christian should not be hard to find or hard to identify in a crowd. And so for the next several weeks, we're going to look at just one word here, recognizable. How we should be recognizable in the crowd. How we should stand out. And we're going to talk about different things. The Christians should not stand out or be recognizable because we're the loudest or we're arrogant or we're narrow-minded or we're overbearing or anything. I'm talking about standing out because of the positive traits that go along with what a Christian is. And we're going to talk about that for about 3 weeks. And today we're going to begin with looking at the men of the church, that a Christian man should be recognizable from the traits and how he lives and the things that he exhibits in his life. Today has a dual purpose. One is to study some concrete ways that those men that we're pursuing the Christian life, concrete ways we can look and see if these things are present in our life. So you can say, yeah, I'm doing that. No, I'm not doing that very well. It keeps us to measure where we need to improve and trust God more in. So that's one of the things that we're going to do. The second thing is this. Early in 2017, here as a congregation, we're going to choose out of this congregation, and you'll have a part in all of that, some additional deacons and elders to serve our congregation. And the scripture that we're going to look at today is known as the qualifications of a deacon and an elder. The ones we look at today are basically for elder, but they're very much a lot the same as what's for a deacon. So the dual purpose, one, for men, us to look at our lives. Two, for you to begin to think about these characteristics, these traits, and then begin to think about the men that are in our midst. And which ones distinguish themselves as ones who, yes, he could be a deacon. Yes, he could be an elder. And you began to think about those things. Write yourself notes. Begin to pray for these men. And then after the first of the year, we'll be going through that process where you can nominate or make us aware of people you think would serve well in that role. And then we're going to be going, and what I'm going to do today is going quickly through these things. But after the first of the year, we're going to take at least the men who are nominated through a study deeper into these things. And there'll be several weeks of that. So you're going to learn more. You're going to know more about the process in 2017. But that's what we want to do today. I remember, I can't remember exactly the age, but I was a teenager. And I remember for the first time seriously reading there in 1 Timothy chapter 7, or chapter 3, verses 1 through 7. And that, if you want to turn there, that's the only place we're going to turn today. The scripture will be on the screen, but if you want to turn there. I remember as a teenager reading that for the first time seriously and going, wow, man, that's a tall order. That's a lot to live up to. But then I remember immediately after that going, but shouldn't we be doing those things anyway? Shouldn't every Christian be doing these things? Not just the ones who would be a deacon or an elder. And that's, I think at a even as a teenager, I recognized where we should be, guys. what we should be living like. And I haven't always lived up to those things, and I'm sure neither have you, but these things do apply to all men. So we're going to look at these things. 1 Timothy chapter 3, verses 1 through 7. I'm going to read here. It says, "Here is a trustworthy saying." This was something Paul would say, and I think he says it 5 times through the epistles here. He's basically saying, listen to this. "Here's a trustworthy saying. If anyone sets his heart on being an overseer, he desires a noble task." An overseer, as you read and study for what we're getting ready to do in 2017, you'll see some words that are interchangeable. Overseer, pastor, shepherd, elder. They're all point to the same thing. It says, "Now the overseer must be above reproach, the husband of but one wife, temperate, self-controlled, respectable, hospitable, able to teach." Verse 3, "Not given to drunkenness, not violent but gentle, not quarrelsome, not a lover of money. He must manage his own family well and see that his children obey him with proper respect. If anyone does not know how to manage his own family, how can he take care of God's church?" Verse 6, "He must not be a recent convert, or he may become conceited and fall into the same judgment as the devil. He must also have a good reputation with outsiders, so that he will not fall into disgrace and into the devil's trap." As you can see, that's a lot of information in 7 short verses. It's a lot of information to take in, but more even to live up to. And I'm going to try to hit these areas quickly today. You used to usually a 2 or 3 point sermon. This one has 11 points, but you're still going to get out of here about the same time. So don't panic too much. But we're going to move quickly through these things. So like I say, we're going to study them deeper as we go, but this is just the beginning. The first one that mentions here, it says above reproach. Reproach basically means that you're beyond accusation, that no one can accuse you of something and it have fact to it. You know, we see that as we begin here, we see that God is primarily interested in character, not talent. Character, not popularity. Nothing other, not your good looks, not the amount of money you have, but it's the character of a man he's talking about. And that's what we too should be concerned with. This man that he's describing is someone that is recognized by others as having a high moral conduct. Perfect? Absolutely not. But obviously pursuing it in his life. Not sinless, but sins less. That you see that in their life. I like what the Greek points to a definition like this. He is not open to attack. I read this it was written during a time of when cattle rustling and horse thievery was rampant, and somebody wrote about somebody that had such a good above reproach character about the life. He says, if you found horses in their living room, you couldn't convict him of horse stealing. In other words, you know, that he has such a good reputation above reproach that even if you saw something that you thought would make him be guilty, you'd go, no, that's not him. So that's what we're talking about. He's someone who's honest, can be trusted, and radiates Christ. Second one here, talks about his behavior with women. And there it says, husband of one wife. This one phrase or this one characteristic or trait has generated more discussion and debate than all of the others combined 10 times over. In my opinion, and listen close to me here, listen close. In my opinion, it is that it gets an unfair amount of attention. Not because it's not important, not because it's not serious, but the mistake that I always saw that was made growing up in the churches that I did. We focused on that one, and you let all the others slide. That too much attention was there and not enough attention given to the other characteristics. The Greek here actually says that he is a one-woman man. Now, is Paul addressing polygamy? That's where you have more than one wife at the same time. It's possible because it was going on at that time, although it was not prevalent in the church. Is Paul addressing divorce and remarriage? Possible. But it would have been also hard to find men who, because you got to remember, when people became Christians then, the men came from a very pagan lifestyle. It would have been very hard to find a man who had not had several wives, who possibly wasn't with several women when he became a Christian. But just remember, in 1 Corinthians 6, after describing some of the terrible lifestyles of some of the people, he says, that's what some of you were. So they came out of a very hard time. So is he talking about that? I don't know. Is Paul addressing men being faithful to their wives, not a womanizer? A man who has a wife, he's faithful to her, and there's no accusation that he has a mistress on the side or that he's running around with other women. Bad reputation for how he has been in the community might be another way. You see, there's questions here, and individuals and churches need to wrestle with this issue and make an informed decision. But we do know this, the bottom line is that if a man cannot be a good husband and a faithful husband, it will be impossible for him to be a good shepherd of the congregation. And like I say, there's going to be plenty of time to talk about this and study it, but all of us need to be looking at things like this. The third one is this. It talks about his self-discipline. He calls it self-control or be vigilant. It is he in control of his life, of his desires, his emotions. Is his life under control? And you know, this is one of the traits of the fruit of the Spirit, self-control. You know, I was playing golf with Irvin Harris years ago, and we were playing, and Irvin's the type of guy when you're playing golf, how he was playing, it didn't change how he was. He was just the same person. And we were on a hole, and there was a lake right in front of the tee box, and Irvin teed off and just hit it right in the water. Didn't go maybe 20 yards, went right in the water. Irvin never said a word. Put another ball down, whack, hit it right in the water in the same puddle that it went out, just right in the same place. We all didn't say anything. He didn't say a word. Put another ball down, hit it. It went. I believe it went in within a foot of where the other two went in. Irvin turned around with the golf club in his hands and the veins bulging out of his head. He goes, I just about lost it that time. No, he was a better man than me. I know that. But that's somebody that was in control of his life, control of his emotions. Paul said, when he was talking about keeping himself under control, he said, I beat my body daily. In other words, he has to fight this every day to keep it under control. And like I said, it's one of the traits of the fruit of the Spirit. You can respect a person that way. If a man has the clear-headed ability to control his own life, his own emotions, his own desires, and the choices he makes, then he can be well suited to guide his fellow believers and brothers and sisters. Number 4, his attitude towards others. It's called hospitality or hospitable. Now, when this was written, it's back during a time when there were very few hotels and inns, and as people traveled, it was very common for a Christian or a Jewish person that if you saw a stranger who was traveling, had a place to stay, you just invite them to your house. You just invite them to come stay with you, and that's where hospitality, that word, grew out of. We do not have that so much today, but the principle is still very much still alive. Are you willing to help the less fortunate? Are you willing to welcome those from the outside? Are you welcoming the strangers? Are you welcoming the new people? People who are different than you, people who have different ideas. The word implies being helpful, loving, and fellowship. I have a book on my shelf that was written many years ago about elders and deacons, and the name of it is They Smell Like Sheep. And the idea is, as a good servant, a good man of Christ, a good elder deacon, he's right in there with the people working. And he says, a shepherd smells like sheep because he's with the sheep. And so for a good man of hospitality, he's right in there with the people. Number 5, his teaching ability. It says that he's able to teach. Now, everything up to this point has been about your moral character. And here it moves to an ability or a willingness. You know, when we think of teaching, this is something I had to learn too. When we think of teaching in the church, we immediately think of standing in a pulpit or being in a Sunday school class or a small group. And we think that's what he's talking about when teaching. But when this was written, not necessarily all those things were Sunday school didn't come about in churches until a couple hundred years maybe at the most ago. So it's not necessarily talking about, is he a good Sunday school teacher? Is he a good youth group leader? But it could be, he's talking about somebody who is willing to share the message of Christ. The idea is, or they have the ability to communicate with someone else anywhere, in any setting. Titus chapter 1 is kind of like the sister to these verses we're reading today. They repeat some of the same things and say them different. One of the things it says in Titus chapter 1, it says, he must hold firmly to the trustworthy message as it has been taught. And this is Paul writing to a young preacher named Titus. He's talking to him about choosing elders and deacons. It says, so that he can encourage others by sound doctrine and refute those who oppose it. It's not necessarily in a classroom setting. It's not excluding that. But it's, are you willing and are you able to tell the message, to talk to people about Christ? And so that presupposes that you're going to study the Bible. So if you don't want to be a Waldo, then you got to know the Bible. You have to be able to talk about the Bible. Next one is this. It's his drinking habits. It says not given to drunkenness or much wine. It's probably not by accident that this follows being able to teach, is it? Because we know what alcohol can do to our thinking and our thought process. We know when you can talk to someone who's drinking and had, as we say, one too many, it even changes the way they talk. And so it talks about somebody that's not going to let that be a problem. The Old Testament warned priests and kings and magistrates and prophets not to get drunk. And some of the situations it says don't even drink at all because you hold these positions. And you may not be a king, a priest, a prophet, or a magistrate, but you're a father, you're a husband, you're a friend, you're a coworker, and so you have to be careful that you don't do the same damage by the alcohol you drink. He talks about being clear-headed. Now, if you want to stand out in this culture today, then don't drink, and you will stand out, because alcohol is involved in everything we do anymore. Next one, he says it deals with his temper and his temperament. That word means not given to blows. I like that. Not given to fighting, to clenching your fists and just getting there and fighting. You're not violent, but you're gentle. You're not quarrelsome. You're able to get along with people, even difficult people. Able to remain under control with people who oppose you or disagree with you. I read that this week that Ronald Reagan, when he was elected president, in one of his first press conferences where he was fielding questions and from reporters, excuse me, there was a woman reporter in the press corps there that she was just known for being very aggressive and like to just nail the president with stuff. But Reagan called on her. And just like her reputation, she just went into a tirade. And there's a question hidden there somewhere, but it was her opportunity to tell Reagan all the things that he was doing wrong and all the things he was guilty of. And the room was just kind of quiet there after she said that. And this is what Reagan said. He says, well, Helen, I'm surprised you could even suggest that about a sweetheart of a guy like me. And it said the room just fell apart, everybody laughing. And it brought everything down. Everybody was calm. But it also told to that press corps, I'm going to argue my positions, but you're not going to ruffle me. You're not going to get me off task. And he set that tone for his 8 years in office. Gentleness is another one of the traits that is named in the fruit of the Spirit. Here's the next one. His attitude towards money. You know that later on, Paul is talking to Timothy, and he says that the love of money is the root of all evil. Very strong words. One of the 10 Commandments is, thou shalt not covet. To be a man of God that stands out, you must master money, and money not master you. Your reputation in your life must bear that out in how you live. Your lifestyle, how you do business, how you treat people that you owe money to or owe money to you, will tell the community what kind of man you are. The next one, it speaks of his home life. The care of the family of God is more complicated than caring for your own family at home. And a man must prove himself capable in his own home before given the responsibility of administering the affairs of the church. I love this. Manage, as it says, is translated lead your family. Can he lead his family? Does your family follow you? When you look at this man and you think about him, does his family follow him? You can control, a man can control and manipulate his family, and he can drive them in the direction that he wants them to be in. You can do that for a season. But at some point, you can only drive them so far. Then they'll have to follow. And when we look at men, we look at ourselves, guys, are we leading our families? Or are we just trying to manipulate them? Next one, number 10. It talks about his spiritual maturity. Basically, it says not a new convert. Literally, it means newly planted. You're picturing a tree newly planted. Now, if all of us have seen sports stars, Hollywood stars who became Christians, and immediately, 2 weeks after becoming Christians, they're on talk shows. Next thing you know, they've written a book. They're doing on the speaking tours about what God means to them. And many, many times, give it 2-3 years, and they've fallen away and gone back to their old ways. They were newly planted. And too much recognition was given to them before that. And what Paul is talking about here, he says there is an expectation of maturing as a Christian. Not just being a Christian a long time, that's part of it, but in that time that we grow in maturity. And Paul says, watch for that kind of man. Number 11 here, it says his reputation with the community. He must have a favorable testimony from those outside the church. And this is a reference to his present conduct, but recognizing also his past reputation. Little will hurt a congregation more than in a community that knows the shortcomings or the evilness of one of its leaders. It was Gandhi, who he studied Christianity. He studied Jesus. And he said this. He said that he almost became a Christian, but decided not to. And this is what he said. He said, I would become a follower of Christ if it wasn't for those who claimed to follow him. What he saw in the people that claimed to follow Christ turned him off to Christ. So much of how we will be able to serve in the church as a leader, and how we'll be able to lead our families, and how we'll be able to lead people from outside the church to the church, will be a result how we are viewed and how we are trusted. So our actions have to speak louder than anything that would drown out the message of Christ. So that's the 11 points there. The guys, your head swirling? Is it spinning? Like I said, that's a tall order to live up to. It's tall order. Is God asking too much? Is Paul asking too much of a man? No. Because that's not just the men that he wants to lead his church. He's talking choose men like this out of the church. He expects us men to be those kind of men in the church. So he's not asking for something unreasonable. He's asking for something that should be there. And so men, as you listen to these traits, and all followers of Christ should be striving, men and women, we should be striving for these things. You've already figured out that this isn't going to be easy, that this is going to be difficult, and it's going to be hard. And there's going to be people who will try to tear you down. There are some people that when they see you trying to have these characteristics, traits, they're going to try to put stumbling blocks in your way. But God values this in a man's life. And if God values it, Satan opposes it. So do not be surprised. If God values it, Satan will oppose it. The church needs men like this to lead the local churches into the next year, the next decade, the next generation. Men led this church before us today and are leading it today. And more men will lead it into the future. Don't you want what you have now to be there for your children, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren? Don't you want it for the people that are out there that do not know Christ? So leadership, the lives of men in the church, is important for generations to come. But it's not just the church who needs this. Your wives need this. They need a man like this. They need a husband that they know they can count on, that they can rely on, that they can walk side by side. But they also know they need a man that will lead them, will protect them, will provide for their family. Your sons need to see men modeling that so they can see how a man treats a woman. And a dad saying to his son, this is how you notice how I treat your mom. And that's the way I want you to treat your wife someday. They need to model that. A daughter needs to see you as a man in the household so that they're out there, when they start looking for a man to marry, the man that's going to be the father of your grandchildren, that they'll choose someone that has characteristics like this because they saw that in their dad and they want the same thing for their children. Our sons, our daughters, our wives need this. They deserve this. So even though it's going to be difficult, it is there. Waldo, or as Paul talked about us in Philippians, he said, I want you to shine like stars. So men, we can choose to be a Waldo or to be a star. And I just pray that as we go out of here today, our men are up for that challenge. I pray that I'm up for that challenge. And that we will shine like stars in the universe. Let's pray. God, as we study these things, may they not discourage us. May they not turn us away, but may they inspire us to be men of such courage and valor and dedication and commitment to you. May it cause our young teenage women here today, as they are in the dating world, that they'll look and measure the men that they give their attention to these standards and say, yes, that's the kind of man I want. May our sons and daughters, our sons especially, aspire to be men as this. And may we step forward and may we observe the men in our midst who will be leaders. May we look and begin to pray for these men, that God will lay it on their heart to be the leaders. We pray this today in your holy name. Amen.